Welcome along to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Jeff and I are here to discuss the win against the Denver Broncos, and we are going to try and get together and review most of the games this season for the Seahawks and what we hope is going to be a very interesting season. Jeff, there's about a season's worth of content from that one game alone, but we have to start with a topic that I fear already you and I are going to be talking about an awful lot this year, and that is the offensive line. So we had what happened in the first half. We then had improvements in the second half. Like, give me your thoughts right now on what you saw. You were there at the game. You were there live. So what did you see from that offensive line?
Offensive is a good word for it. Offensive is a perfect good word for it. I actually was gifted by one of our listeners really good seats. Like, I was third row at like the 40-yard line. So initially it was kind of hard to see the trenches, but I was able to kind of go back when I was flying today and kind of catch up on everything. And it was as bad as it felt to me. And when George Fant went out pretty quick, a lot of our hearts at the stadium just sunk because the guards play has been an issue for a number of years. The guard we were most excited about didn't play yesterday. And 3 of the 5 players who ended up playing the majority of the game were god awful. The pass protection from Laken Tomlinson and Anthony Bradford is just not good enough. And it got to the point where like they couldn't run basic passing plays. And if the adjustment they made at half where they were just running, and they did a lot of creative stuff with their run game. And Bradford and Tomlinson, to be fair, did get better at running blocking. But the way they played in pass protection basically negated any chance Ryan Grubb could run a passing game. And you're taking away DK Metcalf and JSN and some of your strengths of your team when the offensive line's that bad. And Denver has a decent pass rush, but they're not like an elite upper echelon group. They have some good players that are kind of under the radar. But the amount of plays it just felt watching it and seeing it on the TV copy, like the amount of plays that was just instant pressure because they whiffed. And some people were like, well, Ryan Grubb didn't call great plays. Maybe that's true, but I don't think any coordinator can prepare to call a game when their right guard or their left guard is instantly beat off the line, or the right tackle gives up a play, an instant pressure. And I didn't notice like Charles Cross at all at the game, and that's a good thing for an offensive lineman relative to the other 3. And seeing his PFF grade in the mid-90s, I can't remember the last time we've seen that grade for any offensive lineman. So that's a big plus. But man, 3 of the 5 starters were downright awful yesterday. And it was hard to watch. And if they're going against a better defense, that could have even been uglier.
Yeah, I don't understand how it was as bad as it was, Jeff, because, you know, we discussed leading into the season that the line was a concern, that you have question marks at every single position. And that's true. But there's bad and there's that first half. Yeah. And when you sort of see a half like that, I mean, I think everyone's kind of said it by now that we've been, sadly, treated to some of the worst defensive line play in the NFL over the last few years. And yet that somehow managed to take things to a new level. Now, it'll be very easy this week to say, okay, give them a bit of time. You know, it's week 1. I was speaking to somebody else earlier, and I mentioned that I'd watched Jim Harbaugh's post-game speech. And one of the last things he said was, as a team, the greatest improvement you will make is from week 1 to week 2. You will not make a bigger jump at any point this season from week 1 to week 2. So that is sort of perhaps the glass half full way of looking at it. But the problem I have, Jeff, is that my ambition as a Seahawks fan is to watch the Seahawks become really competitive and build towards being a contender again. It's not to beat the Denver Broncos in week 1 and be happy about that and say, great, what a win. It's to sort of see the team build through the year. I'm totally on board with the fact there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be games they're going to lose that are going to be frustrating this year. They could have lost yesterday. But I don't want to see the team derailed in games that should be more interesting than they could end up being by offensive line play like that. When they play the Miami Dolphins in a couple of weeks, I want that, even if the Seahawks lose, I want to see a good game of football. I want to see the Seahawks playing in a competitive way, challenging Miami, being in the game. Same when they go to Detroit. If they go to Detroit and lose like the Rams did last night, I can live with it. I can't live with them getting blown off the ball on the offensive line, the offense looking like it just simply cannot function. That has to change. And good for them that they were able to find something that worked in the second half with that running game and to get things moving. But my word, Jeff, that you have to, if that's just first week ring rust and not playing much in preseason and stuff like that, then great. But it was mighty concerning, wasn't it? And I don't know how you fix that in a season if it carries on beyond week one.
Yeah, that's the scary part. Because like when we all wanted them to invest in the guard position, I think if I was going to criticize their offseason, it would by far be how they handled left guard. Laken Tomlinson's just a guy that his play has clearly fallen off from what he was like a Pro Bowl level player with San Francisco and early in the Jets. And he was awful with the Jets last year. He was part of the worst offensive line in the league. And I thought that signing that did not get me excited. And like you said, you can't run an offense when you have a guy just giving up instant pressures. And Thompson was the cause of one of the safeties yesterday. He had some horrible issues in pass pro as well. And that was a run blocking where he just got whiffed. And that's the thing. Like, we want to watch a good offense this year. And if they have guard play like that, it's going to be hard to run a basic passing play. And the Seahawks' best players on offense are the receiver, that three-headed monster. But you can't even tap into that when you have guard play this bad. And when you have a player like Tomlinson, when you sign someone like him, sure, we're not expecting like what he was 3-4 years ago, but you just hope they can be competent. Like, they should be able to find a competent guard on the market. They don't need a stud, and I would love them to get one or draft one, but they should have competent players. And what Tomlinson and Bradford looked like in the first half was nothing close to that. Stolen Forsythe, he's a backup. I don't even know if he's like an NFL player. He's really bad at leverage, and he's their third string right tackle. So I can't be too hard on him. But the guard play was atrocious. Anthony Bradford, we know what he is. Like, he looks in the running game, he can have some of the best and most powerful run blocks you'll ever imagine. But he's just such a mess in pass protection, and he gives up so many instant pressures. And this is a big year for the Seahawks because not only are we trying to figure out what they are and try to establish an identity, but it's a huge year for the evaluation of Geno Smith. And we want to give him the best evaluation possible because me and you, I think, see Geno more eye to eye than a lot of other people do who wanted to extend him $45 million. I was very much in your camp. But if you can't run basic protection at guard, you're giving up instant pressures, how are we supposed to evaluate this guy? How are we supposed to evaluate this offense? And also, you got to pay DK, like his money's coming up soon. So this has the potential to unravel a lot of their progress because guard play has been their issue for so long. And yesterday in the first half was as bad as I've seen it in years. And that's really disappointing. I'm hoping they should at least be competent. I don't expect them to be great, but I want to see Christian Haynes in the lineup. And I like what I liked about Haynes is he seems steady. And I don't know if McDonald is going to give a rookie that early on. That might be something that he and Pete are do a little bit differently. But I don't know if he's a Pro Bowl level player. I don't think he is. But to me, he can just make one of those positions steady. And they need just a steady player. They don't need a stud with this group. There's a lot of bad O-line play around the league, but there wasn't a lot of offensive lines that looked as bad as Seattle's guard yesterday.
There's a couple of angles I want to bring to the table on this, Jeff. I think the point you just made, though, on DK Metcalf, because you are evaluating a lot of players here. Like, DK Metcalf is going to be 27 this year.
Yeah.
At the end of this offseason, he will have a year left in his contract. You are going to have to get in around the negotiating table and make a decision as to whether or not you're going to extend his contract. Now, if he has a lot of games, like he probably won't, because even if the line continues to struggle, you would imagine that DK is going to have a game or two where he has a lot of yards still. But if he has many 3-catch 29-yard games like he had yesterday, then how do you determine whether you want to keep him, whether it's worth it? And the problem is if he can't get the targets because you can't get him the ball because the offensive line struggle, and then you say, well, we can't justify paying him $30 million a year like the top receivers. We're going to send him off somewhere for a first-round pick. And then he goes and plays with the Chiefs and then ends up being the league MVP with paying Patrick Mahomes. Then you look stupid. And then people will say, well, hang on a minute. You just traded away someone who is a legendary receiver to go and help another team win a Super Bowl or be very, very competitive. And you did it because your offensive line stinks. It was nothing to do with the player himself or the opportunities that he had to play in Seattle. So that's the problem with evaluation. It's gonna make. How can you evaluate Jackson Smith and Jigba right now? Like, we're all kind of waiting to see. We need a breakout. Yes, a top 20 pick. We need to see Jackson Smith and Jigba playing like a high first round pick. How is he going to ever play like that if the quarterback's got no time in the pocket to throw him the football? And he is a player that at Ohio State was able to get downfield and make big plays. I want to see a bit more of that and less of the stuff around the line of scrimmage from Jackson Smith and Jigba. But if you've got no time to actually allow a receiver to run downfield, then how are you going to be able to get the ball to him? So that's a massive problem. It's not just the evaluation of Geno. It's like a lot of different players as well that we need to evaluate, and we can't. And then the other two things I was going to say, Jeff, is, John Schneider made a comment that I think if you could give him a time machine, he would go back and would not say, which is that guards are overpaid and overdrafted.
Yeah.
Because that comment can haunt you if your guard play is crap. Like, if you can't find solutions, then saying that you think they're overpaid and overdrafted is not going to be a good look, because people will go, well, go on then. What's the answer? If you're saying that it's not worth paying a guard X or drafting a guard or a center high, then you've got to come up with solutions to that, I'm afraid. Otherwise, you're better off just not saying anything. Because if you think it's really hard, and it's true, it's hard. And I'm going to give you an example as to why it's hard in a second. It's hard to find offensive linemen. Just say so. You don't have to start saying other teams are making mistakes by drafting these guys early, because all that will happen is someone will draft a guard in the second round or the first round and they'll play really well. And then people will go, that's one example, and here's your example. So, and they'll hold it and John Schneider's a good GM, but offensive line has not been his strong point in terms of drafting and development. And maybe the development of players is a problem, but certainly drafting players, they haven't hit on many offensive linemen. So that's going to be a question mark. The other thing I was going to say, though, Jeff, to provide some context and in defense of those comments that John Schneider has made, I was watching Red Zone, and because the Bears-Titans game was close, they kept showing a lot of it at the end. And like J.C. Latham, who, there's been a couple of reports that the Seahawks liked him a lot. The Titans drafted him in the top 10. And Peter Skoronski, was he like the 11th overall pick, something like that? He's the left guard. Lloyd Cushenberry is the center in Tennessee now. He's paid a lot of money. And I can't remember who the right guard and the right tackle are, but, I think, is it Petit Frere might be there still? He was like a third round pick or something. That they've basically, the point I'm making is they've invested a lot in their line, and it absolutely stank. Like the Bears just had their way with Tennessee's offensive line. And this ends up being the problem, is that Tennessee have not only invested so much in their line, they've arguably got the best offensive line coach in the whole NFL currently in Callahan. And you think they're struggling. And like, they've done everything that, if you said to me and you, Jeff, like, you're going to invest a lot in your offensive line and then get a great O-line coach, that sign me up. But even then, in week one, it was a struggle. So you kind of just end up sitting here thinking, what are the Dallas Cowboys doing every year to constantly draft and develop their offensive linemen? They'll even take offensive linemen as undrafted free agents and turn them into competent starters. What are they doing? What's the secret sauce that they do in Dallas and one or two other places that virtually every other NFL team can't find? And how do the Seahawks get to a point where we don't need them to have a top 10 offensive line? It'd be great. Can they have the 17th best offensive line? That'd be fine, Jeff.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I don't know if you've seen some of the stats from yesterday. Have you seen the amount of quarterbacks that pass for under 200 yards? Like, it is a league-wide problem. It's not just there's just a lot of teams with shoddy offensive line play, but we're not covering other teams. We're just covering the Seahawks, and their highest offensive draft pick this year was a guard. This was a position they targeted. It was a player that we all thought was more of a second-round pick than a third-round pick, but he's a player they're going to have to hope hits because they need someone like him in their lineup. Anthony Bradford was a project, and he's looked a lot. He looks like a project, and he doesn't look like a guy who's a starting level player based on his pass protection. But yeah, mentioned Dallas, the Seahawks, the guy they wanted to draft at guard and the guy they tried trading up for was Cooper Beebe, who's playing center in Dallas. And funny enough, you mentioned it. J.C. Latham was the guy they thought was very likely going to end up on their team. They were worried about the Chargers taking him, but they didn't think Byron Murphy would get there. They thought he'd be long gone, and they thought they had a shot at Latham coming down, and he was going to play guard for them. He's playing left tackle. So they really did prioritize guard in this draft. They liked Latham, and then they liked Beebe as their second round option or third round option. And they tried trading up for him, and then they figured Haynes would be gone at this spot. So I wonder if Zach Zinter was an option. So they really looked at guards. But again, that's just one, and that's a rookie, and it's such a tough position. I would have liked to see them add some better veterans. And like, I'm not saying pay Damian Lewis the contract that Carolina gave, because Carolina's line play looked atrocious yesterday. And they're probably like they had an atrocious day. They already lost maybe their best player for the season today. So it's a big problem. And yeah, I agree with you, Schneider. That comment is going to sting with them because their guards yesterday in the first half was as bad as any offensive line performance I've seen from the Seahawks in a long time. And I was just thinking, man, thank God Aaron Donald's retired.
Wow. Yeah, I've not even thought of that. That's a great point. We'll talk about something. We'll balance all of the offensive line talk out with something a bit more positive about the defense in a second. But if you have a super chat, if you want to support the channel, send them in. And seeing that it's quite busy in the comment section. If you want to support us, if you've got a question, if you've got a point that you want to make, and you want to join in, then super chat, and we'll put it up on the screen. So as bad as the offensive line was, Jeff, and again, they got it sorted out to an extent in the second half to function and to put some points on the board and to come away with a win in the end. Defensively, though, I thought it was a very impressive performance, with the obvious caveat that Bo Nix was awful, and I didn't really understand what Sean Payton was doing in that game. But you can only play what's in front of you, and I thought Payton's plan seemed to be to get the ball out very quickly and to get Bo Nix out of the pocket very quickly as well, to take the pass rush out of the game. So obviously the defensive line didn't have the big impact that I think many of us were maybe expecting against a rookie quarterback, not behind not a great Denver line. But what it did do, Jeff, is it took the D-liners out of the game and just brought the second-level defenders into the game, the linebackers and the safeties and the cornerbacks, and they were flying to the ball. Apparently, you are allowed to tackle the opponent. That was confirmed yesterday. We saw that, maybe in the final throws of the Carroll era, we were thinking that was banned. But you can actually tackle opponents. You can actually break up a screen pass before it's gained 20 yards downfield. And you can turn the ball over, which was all really reassuring to know, Jeff.
I was told by a lot of people online that the Seahawks made a huge mistake letting go Quandre Diggs. And to see those two safeties, and maybe you can add three with Kayvon Wallace with the forced fumble, but the way Rayshon Jenkins and Julian Love were flying around the ball and just form tackling, that was my biggest takeaway being there live, how good they were in space. Jenkins made a hit on Javonte Williams in space that might have saved the touchdown. And seeing those guys just being in the right spot around the ball, and I just can think of so many plays in the last 2 years where Quandre Diggs was just in space on a running back and just totally whiffing, or Jamal Adams making one tackle and like pointing to the back of his jersey and things like that. And a lot of people were critical. I was a little critical of them signing Julian Love before this year, but I guess they saw something in the safeties and the linebackers. They were just flying to the ball, and they were hitting, they were playing sound, and just seeing, and they missed a bunch of tackles too. Like, I don't know if it was specific players in that group, but I look, and Jordan Brooks had one tackle yesterday. One tackle. So that's another guy we were told where they screwed up, and just seeing like what the safeties did and the linebackers did, and them hitting and being technically sound and being in the right spot. And they just looked fast. And just, I was with you. I did not understand the way Denver approached the game. They were throwing, like, for my eye test, I was joking with this fan behind me that they kept throwing passes only 1 yard. And then I looked up, and it was like the third lowest average depth per pass in since 1960. So they played scared, but regardless of that, Seattle just was fun to watch on defense. And I couldn't see the trenches from like my angle, but like the numbers Leonard Williams put up, and I saw Daniel Jeremiah tweeting about Boye Mafe. Like, I could not tell that at all. I saw Derek Hall chase down some guys, but the linebackers and safeties were really what I took away from that game. How good they were at hitting, how well coached they were, and that's not even including all the other DBs that played great in coverage. So I was really encouraged by the safety play. It was kind of poetic with Cam Chancellor there raising the flag to have like the best tackling game from a safety group I've seen from the Seahawks maybe since the Legion of Boom era. Like, I was really impressed with how Julian Love played. He got like a 91 PFF grade. And I thought Rayshawn Jenkins was the one who blew me away. I didn't get to see him much in the offseason, and he was really impressive.
I think it was a very good game. I don't. You mentioning that Daniel Jeremiah had said that about Boya Mafe made me ask two questions. Like, because Rich Eisen also said that Bo Nix looked great, despite the fact that.
Saw that.
And my questions when I saw both those things were, what game were you watching? And two, why were you watching this game? Like, that was
There's only 3 games on. There's only 3 games on.
But if you were a Seahawks fan, I mean, unless you just love circus football, like unless you're a Seahawks or Broncos fan, that was a switch-off game at halftime. I take your point. You know, the Buccaneers and the Commanders didn't. It looked kind of one-sided, and the Chargers and the Raiders. I mean, I didn't see much of it. I had half an eye on red zone when the Seahawks were in commercial breaks. I saw the fight they had at the end, and that was pretty much it. But wow, I don't understand either of those things, because it's not that Boya Mafe played badly. He just wasn't really in the game.
No,
he didn't have it. He didn't warrant a tweet, did he? Really?
No, I didn't see anything. But then I saw like pressure numbers. He was like 4th in the league in pressures yesterday. He had like 7 pressures. And someone who I asked about the game, like, what did I miss? And they said, Boya looked back. And I was like, what? I didn't see him. Like, I didn't pick up on that at all. But I don't know. Everyone, you have 10 people to watch a game, you'll get 10 different opinions. But the Bo Nix one was crazy to me, because my takeaway was how awful he looked.
I thought he was abysmal. To me, Jeff, it's too early to write a player off.
100%.
But that's as close as I think. I think I'm nearly there. Like, I think I'm feeling as if you are ever going to write a player off becoming anything special in the NFL. You somewhat can already anticipate that there's a low ceiling here. Like, what you saw, he's a 24-year-old quarterback. He is not somebody who, he is somebody, Jeff, I wrote about this yesterday, who has come from an Oregon system that in the 2 games they've had already, they've thrown for 650 yards. Their quarterback has 5 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, and everyone's saying he's playing like crap in Dylan Gabriel. And the Oregon Ducks are not playing well. It is an offense that will produce stats. And Bo Nix was terrible at Auburn. He's gone to Oregon and played in a system that works for him, where there was a lot of throws, very easy, high percentage dump offs, essentially extended handoffs from that offense. He has been drafted to play in Sean Payton's system. Who knows if Sean Payton's system is even worth having anymore? But he's been paid 20 million years to install it. And then you plonk Bo Nix into that. You're like, this just does not feel like a recipe for success. And if he is going to be a system quarterback, you want to see better than that. If he's, I don't know. I mean, I'd be really worried. I thought there was a lesson for the Seahawks there. That, we're already seeing it. There are quarterbacks that are somewhat limited in college football now, but they're playing in systems that allow them to put up big yardage. And when you actually sort of look at them and you have to sort of make a decision as to, this is fine. But when they get to the next level, they're going to have to be difference makers. If you were going to draft them in the first round, is this player a difference maker? I'm afraid when you watch Bo Nix, it was very hard to say yes. I ended up giving him a 3rd round grade in the draft when he was drafted 12th overall. And I feel a lot better about my grade than I think Denver probably feels about theirs right now. Or maybe they just had him in grade in round 3 and thought we're going to take him anyway. I don't know. But it just did not look good. But to go back to the Seahawks defense, just how good, Love just looked like a different player. Like, I said to Rob, he looked faster. He was all over the place. Jenkins, superb. Yeah, I think Tariq Woolen, Jeff, this is going to sound too much, but I'm going to say it anyway. Tariq Woolen has at least got the potential to be the best cornerback in the NFL. He has got the speed, the length, the size, and I thought watching him yesterday, he had like a laser focus. And then you compare it to last season when it just felt like he was arsing about most games. Like there's a total difference in his body language and approach. And I thought he was fantastic yesterday. And he's got 1 interception already. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this season, he has got his career completely back on track. That he is somebody, after 3 years in the NFL, that the Seahawks feel like, we've got to get this guy tied down long term. And that he actually could be talked about as one of the special defensive backs in the league. I know it's very early to start talking that way after 1 week, but the man has got he's got the best physical tools at his position in the entire NFL. He just needed that guidance and that coaching to get there. And when you see that, wow, Jeff, I mean, that he looked really good yesterday, and I'm hopeful that this is going to continue. And it just wasn't a Bo Nix thing.
No, I was blown away with how good he looked, and I was listening when I was on the landed from the plane to Mike McDonald's show today, and you could just tell. I think it was you pointed out how excited he was the first time he got asked about him, and he had to like step back and like calm himself down. And he was just talking about how good his coverage technique is, and I noticed how much more physical and willing to take on contact he was. And so if you can combine like his pure skills with details and refinement and physical play, he's got like when you hear Sherman talk about the team, like he always points to Tariq Woolen first as like the guy. And so he's blown away, and no one knows DBs better than him. And if they can get him being more physical, and they got some big games coming up to see what he's all about. We're going to play Miami in a couple of weeks. That's maybe the fastest receiving duo in the league. We're going to see how they do. Like the Niners have had a lot of success against him over the years. They've just been able to kind of fool him. So it's going to be really fascinating to watch. And again, the thing I've always talked about this team is where are the blue chip players? He's got everything you need. And he looked like one yesterday. And you saw Surtain on the other side. I didn't see much of a difference between Surtain and Woolen on the field yesterday. And my God, Devin Witherspoon looked fantastic too. And he could have had an interception. He was just flying around. And I heard Robert Mays talking this morning, and he was talking about how coaches are just blown away by Witherspoon and some of the stuff he can do, just identifying stuff quickly on the fly, and how he's just got some of the best football IQ. So, man, having those two corners and Rick Woolen, like, if there's any player you need to be encouraged between Cross and Woolen, Kenneth Walker, like that 2022 draft class is starting to really emerge. But yeah, I think it's hard not to come out of that game and think, man, Rick could have an awesome all-pro level year this year.
Well, that's the great thing, when you think of Mike McDonald, look what he did for Roquan Smith, look what he did for Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah.
Look what he did for some of those pass rushers, giving them career years. Like, by the end of last season, people were starting to talk about Kyle Hamilton as one of the best defensive players in the league. Mm-hmm. And you do wonder, well, could Woolen and or Witherspoon reach that status? Because it's harder for players who've already been, the chances are no one's going to be saying Julian Love is one of the best defenders in the NFL by the end of the age, because he's been around a lot. Even if the grade or the performance warrants it, people are generally not going to be saying that. But with the cornerbacks, they're young enough whereby people are willing to dive in and jump in and talk about that. So I think that was extremely encouraging. And more, Jeff, and the linebackers, we've not touched on them as well. Look, have you seen some? You seem like you saw something there.
Have you seen the Rams injuries that just came out?
No, I was really worried because the way that you explained, I thought, my God, this is not Ken Walker's gone on IR or something. Or
no. So McVay is doing his press conference right now, and okay, so let's start. Puka Nacua is going on IR with a PCL injury, so he's out a month.
Wow, at least.
Okay, Steve Avila has an MCL sprain, and he might be going on the IR. Their left tackle, Joseph Newthboone, who's their backup left tackle, he's out a few weeks with an ankle injury. Their other starting guard, Kevin Dotson, has an ankle sprain, and their other right tackle, Rob Havenstein, is already out. All of that just came out, so they might be down 4 offensive line and their best young receiver. So I was like, holy shit! I'm impressed you caught that. I was just like,
yeah, I was worried because your reaction was like, I thought there was some injury news for the Seahawks, and then it's good to know it's not Seattle, it's the Rams. But
the Rams.
That is, I mean, and that's difficult obviously the Rams don't have many fans, but the fans that they do have will be crestfallen to know that the injuries are stacking up already in the season. Wow. So, and they got ran all over the very end of that game. So interesting, and as a division rival, it could be good news for the Seahawks. So I never want to tempt fate because you're only a week away from having a similar list yourself, especially with the physical way the Seahawks are playing. I was going to just talk about the linebackers because, again, you don't want to – it's not about being disrespectful to who has been with the team in the past, because obviously everybody loves Bobby Wagner, and I thought Jordan Brooks was a decent player. Not a great player, a decent player. I think disappointing for a first-round pick because of the cost, but ultimately – he wasn't bad either. I thought watching those two play against the Broncos was such a breath of fresh air, Jeff. That's what I want to see. Linebackers who fly to the ball. It was like Dodson was like a heat-seeking missile. He was just flying all over the place. It seemed like most of his tackles hit the spot. Jerome Baker just looked as advertised. Right place, right time to make the plays that he needs to play. He is not going to be, Luke Kuechly, but he is going to do his job. And watching the two of them, having had a little bit of concern, Jeff, because of the health status of both of them during camp, if nothing else, at least their first performance, they showed if they can stay on the field, they can both be a real asset for the Seahawks.
Yeah, and a lot of people identify that position group as like a huge question mark with the team. There's a lot of people stressed out about, especially once they got injured. But I was very impressed with Tyrell Dodson, and I had known he played really well in a small sample, but me and you had been kind of angling for years. Okay, get the money out of the safety position, get kind of these mid-tier players, and linebacker. They were really since the early, like since Bobby and KJ Wright in like 2020, they have not gotten good linebacker play. And Jordan Brooks was a pretty solid coverage linebacker, and he covered a lot of ground, but he never really made a play. Like I can't think of the top of my head how many splash plays Jordan Brooks made. And that was always something that made me hesitate on him. And I didn't want to pay him in free agency. And just seeing Tyrell Dodson, who's the one with the green dot on his helmet, he's calling the signals, like McDonald said. I thought he looked great. And Jerome Baker just looks steady. Like he's in the right spot. He reminded me kind of like a low-end KJ Wright. And KJ Wright was a fantastic player. But like, this is the kind of investments we want to see them make at linebacker. We don't want to see them spending $20 million a year like they did on Bobby Wagner or reset the market. We think there's just undervalued guys, and Dodson was a guy they took a flyer on, and I thought when I saw him in the preseason, I thought he looked really solid, and I was really comfortable with him, and just he was all around the ball yesterday. He was good in coverage, and as much as, like you said, as much as we love Bobby Wagner, he was a liability last year, and probably the year before they cut him, and just teams would pick on him in coverage, and I don't know if this was Mike McDonald, I don't know if this was John Schneider, but this is McDonald's pet position, and it seems like they've made two pretty good identifications, and I don't know how Baker's had injury problems, and Dodson's never done it over a full season. But yeah, I was really encouraged by what I saw yesterday, and they're going to play some good tight ends in the coming weeks. They're going to play guys who are going to cover over the middle of the field. So we're going to see more and more and learn more about these guys. But I thought game one, I thought they both looked excellent.
Very much so. We've got a couple of super chats. Send those in if you want to support the channel. If you've got a question, Michael, thank you for yours. Thanks for your content, Rob. Appreciate your coverage for the Hawks. Are you at all concerned with a quiet game from Byron Murphy? Jeff, this is an interesting question. Thank you for it, Michael. I actually had the chance to. Someone posted all of Byron Murphy's snaps on Twitter.
Oh yeah,
today, so you could easily just watch them. And sort of get a feel for what was working, what wasn't working. And it definitely looked as if Denver were very conscious of him. They had the guard and the center constantly passing off to Murphy. Occasionally he would have double teams. It was a bit of a struggle for him at times. Early on in the game, I think there was some success for him. He had one swim rip move, got into the backfield. I think maybe that sort of spooked Denver a little bit, and they did shift their protection a little bit to cover for him. Don't let him beat you, sort of thing. But then as the game went on, I thought he was running into a lot of blocks. I thought he was kind of like a magnet towards the blockers, and it ended up just sort of hand fighting with them and didn't really have much of a plan to get off those blocks once he'd engaged. Now, the one thing that Byron Murphy, what I will say, watching a lot of him at Texas in the build-up to the draft, was that he was not that shoot the gaps, constant sort of disruption, impacting games with, high-end splash plays. He was not, I think you and I might have talked about this, or maybe it was with Brian, was that with some other defensive tackles, and Ndamukong Suh, Jonathan Allen, those kind of players, you could have a highlights video of 10 minutes and it would start off with some ridiculous play. Jonathan Allen's, remember, he was like the Superman flying over a blocker that was on the floor or something to get to the quarterback. It was a ridiculous play. And Byron Murphy just didn't have those kind of highlight reel plays. But his overall performance at Texas was very, very good. So I think we have to be prepared for the fact that he's not going to be an Aaron Donald blow the game up type of player. He might just be a very, very good defensive tackle. And look, Grady Jarrett was the comparison that Jim Nagy would often make. And Grady Jarrett's never been a sack specialist. He's just been a very, very good defensive tackle. So I think that has to be remembered, Jeff. But I do think there are ways that he can be taught to have more impact. And I guess that the positive thing is that the Seahawks have a coach now who turned Justin Madubuike, into now known as Nnamdi Madubuike, turned him into one of the best interior pass rushers in the league by getting him on the move and stunting and doing all sorts of tricks. And maybe they can do a few things like that with Byron Murphy.
Yeah, frankly, I wasn't shocked by what I saw. It's a position that takes time. Think of a lot of the best defensive tackles in the league. Quinnen Williams in the Jets. 2 years into the league, a lot of people thought he was a bust. He's now a premier defensive tackle. He's going to be a $30 million a year guy. Dexter Lawrence, he took time. Aaron Donald is obviously the rare specimen that didn't. He just hit the ground running. But a lot of the best defensive tackles, it took them. It's a position that teams, there's a huge difference. We saw his raw skill in the preseason. You can't be that physically dominant, even over a backup offensive lineman. Even like Frank Clark his first year, he looked so dominant in the preseason, and then the game started, and it's just a totally different mental game. You have to learn, and you can see Murphy's skills already. His feet are excellent. His feet, he just has to learn. Like you said, they're going to game plan for him. He's going to be getting double teamed. The fact that he's getting double teams already, I think that helped Leonard Williams a bit. But yeah, this is a position where a lot of people were having rookie of the year chatter, and that would be nice. But for me, I was always like, I looked at so many of these defensive tackles, and it takes time. Justin Madubuike didn't hit till year 3 and really didn't hit until Mike McDonald's second year. So that's been the common comparison. But we've seen so many of the premier defensive tackles. Jeffrey Simmons, same thing. He didn't really hit until his second year. And I'm not saying Murphy's going to be like that every game this year, but there's a big difference between playing first string offensive guards versus what he saw in the preseason. It becomes a lot more mental. It becomes a lot more coaching points. It's a lot of handwork. You have to learn to be a pro. And Murphy's gotten, apparently he's been really good with Jaron Reed. He's been really good with Leonard Williams, just asking the right questions. But I thought he was going to struggle a little bit, and I wasn't shocked to see it. He didn't play as many snaps as I would have guessed, but you can still see his raw potential. And when you look at all these defensive tackles that were drafted in that same range, and you look at the comparison, I wasn't shocked by what I saw. I kind of figured that might be the case.
Yeah, I think some very good points there. And it may be that he, like most rookies, takes a bit of time to adjust in the NFL. Yeah. We've got this one here from Hawks fan Matt Man. Appreciate the super chat. How much do you chalk up the O-line's first half to rust and lack of preseason reps together? There was a lot of bad offense across the league yesterday. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. We touched on it a little bit. I do think there is something to be said for that, Jeff. It is the one position that you really need chemistry, and the Seahawks keep changing their offensive line every year, so there's never a chance to build any chemistry, and then they don't play during preseason. Connor Williams comes in. I mean, it's quite clear that they knew they needed to do something on that offensive line. Like, of all the teams, we need to do something. Let's get Connor Williams in. So that was a move probably predicated by what they saw in camp, and we're seeing a bit of what happened in that first half. And it is true that there was a lot of issues. Like I kept seeing people mentioning. I followed a few different people, and they're like reporting on different games. So someone, I think at one point, was reporting that Justin Herbert's interior line had let him down, and that they couldn't run the ball in Cincinnati and stuff like this. And you think, okay, so if you watched every game, you'd have a lot of spare time on your hands first, but second of all, you would probably see that there are lines across the league that are struggling, and that's kind of why you need a second game, don't you, Jeff? You need to sort of see that second game to see, can they just be not useless against the Patriots? And the good thing is the Patriots upset the Bengals, but they're by no means suddenly a great team. You don't look at the Patriots D line and go, oh my word, I'm terrified by that. This is the kind of game that if you are going to, I'm not saying dominate the game or anything, but if you're just going to have a better performance than you had in that first half, this feels like an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and it's just a position group that requires so much cohesion, so much communication, and so much knowing what your guy's going to do on the other side. And the thing we've been so critical is that Schneider's replacing guys feels like 3 guys every year. And you think of the best Seahawks offensive line; those guys played together for years. You didn't go in every year. Like I remember one year they brought in a new right tackle, but left guard to right guard was the same 4 players. A little harder now with the way the cap is, but you've got a guard that's never played with the Seahawks and didn't get a lot of preseason snaps. You got Anthony Bradford, who's never played beside Connor Williams or George Fant, and who's a guy who's a very raw player. Yeah, you have to say the lack of, and that's the thing. Every year it just feels like how many positions have been the same year over year for the Seahawks scream? It's been like years really since, like, other than Charles Cross playing 3 years, everyone else has been like, it's a rotating door. And so, yeah, the Patriots, yeah, they gave the Bengals some trouble yesterday, especially offensively. Keon White looked really, really good. He was a guy that we studied a lot in the last draft when they drafted Derek Hall. But interior guys, they don't have much that have dominating. Their best interior, unfortunately, has a pretty severe health issue, and Christian Barmore is not going to be playing next week. So that might be a bit of a break for the Seahawks. But yeah, we need to see them against a couple more opponents coming up. The Dolphins don't have a serious interior player. They got Calais Campbell. It's probably their best one now that they don't have Christian Wilkins anymore. But yeah, we're going to need to see more of a sample. And yeah, there's definitely, if you saw all the bad offensive lines and all the lack of cohesion, yes, there is a talent dearth, but the way preseason's handled and just the difference between a practice and a game speed, you definitely saw it across the whole league. I can't think of many offensive lines that it looked even good yesterday, other than like Detroit.
Yep, completely agree. Hawk Scoot says, our throwback colours and defensive PFF grades, which are blue and green, this is what he's getting at, they have a striking resemblance. Go Hawks. I love the throwbacks, Jeff. I don't know where you are in the I can't remember if we've discussed this or not. Do you have an opinion on whether you'd like to see them go to sort of the throwback style permanently? Because I keep pestering the Seahawks every time the Seahawks Twitter post anything about them. I'm like, I'm hoping that my pressure from 5,000 miles away will encourage like Burt Cold or Jody Allen will see it and go, look, the fans want these permanently, because I love the throwback colors.
I don't know what the hell they're waiting for. Those jerseys are beautiful. They're probably the nicest jerseys in the whole entire league. And their other jerseys are pretty, like, they don't do much for me. They're regular home and away. And just when you watch them, and like, so few things have like totally like positive reactions these days from like general acceptance from everyone. Like, even when like the worst aggregator like will be like, the Seahawks are wearing these jerseys today, it is a general like, okay, those are awesome. And like, they need to make the switch already. Like, we shouldn't have to get excited every time they just wear the jersey. That should just be the jersey. It's so much better than their regular home jersey.
Yeah, and look, the NFL is this great thing. Like in sport over here, they change the jersey every year. It's just a way to make money out of the fans, and it's a disgrace. And they cost a fortune. These jerseys, they change all the time. But the great thing about the NFL is that, you think of the teams like the Packers and the Cowboys, and they have their jerseys are never going to be modernized. They're never going to change. And there's something sort of brilliantly classic about the way a lot of these teams look. And then I have to say, you have a lot of these teams that have changed their jerseys in the last few years, Jeff, that don't have those sort of historic jerseys. And they kind of look like they're going to date very, very quickly. And the thing about these throwbacks is they're not going to date. Like, they just look fantastic. Like, if the Seahawks go back to these, they will simply join the group of teams that have amazing classic uniforms. And as you say, like, fans of other teams are constantly going, when are they going to make these the permanents? And people will say, well, modernize the throwbacks and make them frankly, whatever they were wearing yesterday, just wear that every home game. Like, I don't know what they're going to do with the logo. I mean, like, if you have to go back to the old logo, I mean, it does look, maybe the logo looks a little bit more dated than the new one. I don't know what you do with that, but they just look so clean. Like, go with that. And Denver's a good example. Denver's new unis look like they're going to date within about 6 months. And yet they brought out a throwback, and all the fans are going, make the throwback the permanent uni, because it looked good. And it looked like Denver, and it looked like unique to them. Like, there's no college teams wearing the Denver throwback. So, but they've just kind of got this orange and navy purple type thing going on, and it's like, yeah, but that just looks like UTEP. Like you look like Texas at El Paso.
It
Like,
looks like an XFL team. Like
yeah,
it has no like resemblance of the Broncos. I think if every team just went back to their jerseys from like 1993,
yeah.
I think the league would have significantly better jerseys. Like the Titans wore like the old Houston Oilers, and if you look at all the teams, like the Packers, Cowboys, they've stayed the same. The 49ers, even their throwbacks are better. The Rams kind of went back to throwback style. They're almost all better. So I don't know why they probably pay these guys like millions of dollars to do marketing, and they come up with the Denver's shit jerseys. Like I don't know how you could have possibly come up with that. And their jerseys from like the Elway years are fantastic. So I don't know if it's just like a marketing quick make money quick scheme or what, but no, I don't understand that part about the NFL. It's like you put 5 executives in the room and somehow you come up with that when like the clear answer is just sitting right in front of them.
What all teams need to do, Jeff, is they need to identify like the 10 people who are like us, who just spend all of our time like following these teams and then going on streams like this and banging on about the team. Because like we've like invested a lot of commitment into this. And if they just kind of came to like 10 or 15 of us and went, what do you think they should do? Like they'd probably get it right, because you kind of understand, like you have a pulse of the fan base. But they will pay somebody, like you say, a lot of money who's probably not even from Denver or Seattle to come up with some kind of concept, and they'll like have like language to justify why they've done what they've done, and it will just all be a load of bollocks. And the jerseys will be inevitably replaced. Like the new Denver jersey will not last long, in the same way that like Jacksonville changed theirs all the time. Like it will not last long because it doesn't have a classic, quality, timeless look. And watching Ken Walker fly into the end zone, and there's well done to the Seattle Times photographer who managed to get the photo of Walker flying into the end zone in those clean, crisp uniforms. It just looks fantastic. And that's why they've got to make the permanent change. And do you know what, Jeff? I think they are. I just hope they're not going to go for the modernized compromise throwback with the colors, but a modern take, because you don't need to do that. This is perfect.
Yeah.
And have if you want the navy blue as an alternative, do that. I'd wear them once a week. A tribute to Marshawn and Cam and Russell. Great.
Exactly.
But then next week go back to the throwbacks. Like that's really what
no more of the action green.
No. Do you know what? You can wear the throwbacks 3 times, but they're only wearing them twice. And I'm convinced that's because they want the third one to be the action green.
I hate the action green.
Awful.
Yeah.
Awful. No good. The only real other thing, unless there's any other super chats want to come in, the other thing I want to sort of to touch on a little bit here, Jeff, is I suppose a little bit of a draft angle. And as I'm sort of watching it, the encouraging thing is, I know we've talked a lot about the offensive line. There are some offensive linemen in this draft who are somewhat interesting, but I can't help but always keep half an eye on the quarterbacks. And it really is interesting that when you've done this for so long, I'm finding it easier to sort of see who's clearly not very good. Watching Riley Leonard play for Notre Dame and watching Connor Weigman play against Notre Dame the week before, we're already sort of chipping away at this quarterback class, Jeff. And it makes me wonder a little bit. I was sort of thinking about contemplating this yesterday. I don't think John Schneider has passed on anybody who we can have any real regrets over so far.
No.
And for that reason, it's hard to criticize him for not having, because after every draft, we kind of do say it's another draft without even taking a shot on somebody. But if you're not taking your shot on guys who ultimately don't work out, how do you criticize that? And it's just, it's a frustrating waiting game for those of us who kind of do want to, because it's going to have to happen eventually. I know it was said on the broadcast yesterday that Geno Smith thinks the next 10 years are going to be his sort of time to shine. But, there aren't many players, Geno, who last into the mid-40s. There just aren't. There are very few players who last to the late 30s. So it's ambitious. But can you remember Russell Wilson always used to say, I want to play till I'm 42 or something like this. And he looks, well, he's for the last 3 years, Jeff, he's looked physically spent.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
And look, Geno's, people say he's not played as many games, but it's just, you do get old. Like, I'm 40. Yeah, I feel I've not played a single NFL game. Like, I feel like I've aged. And I know that Gino's an athlete and I'm not. But the point is your body does get older. You can't do things like things between like 32 and 40 change. So it's not a guarantee that just because he's not played as many games as a Russ or something like that, he's going to be able to play until he's 45. So you are going to have to draft someone eventually. But it kind of goes to show they are going to have to just wait this out until the opportunity arrives, Jeff. And it's kind of frustrating. And some teams wait 20, 30 years for that guy to pop along, or they get aggressive and make mistakes. And it's hard to sort of explain to people. Like, there are one or two in the fan base who just constantly complain about the lack of drafting a quarterback. But there's no point just taking someone for the sake of it. You have, at this position of all positions, you've got to wait for excellence. You've got to seek upper echelon traits, and they're not always there.
And that's, like, you've summed up Schneider's probably what he would tell you behind the scenes. I haven't talked to him about it. I don't know Schneider at all. But I'm guessing that's exactly what he would say. It's just really the chances they've had. They made their push to get Josh Allen. They offered Russell Wilson in his prime a way to get him. Mahomes, they could have been aggressive. They actually could have pulled that off. If you look at like the capital they did have and what he ultimately went for, they could have made that move. That would have been crazy at the time. But and then really anywhere else, like, yeah, there just hasn't been. It's been where they've drafted, the years they've drafted, and we'll never know what would have happened if Anthony Richardson would have made it to pick 5. We'll never know. I've heard both sides of that. I've heard some people say yes. I've heard some people say no way. But Will Levis did not look good yesterday. And that was a guy that if he came out and like lit the world on fire or lights it up this year, that would be a bad look for them if Will Levis comes out and dominates and they took a third receiver over a potential franchise quarterback. That's really the one I thought, like, maybe that one comes back to bite them. But he looked awful yesterday. So it's one game. Again, I don't want to judge too much on one game. But yeah, if you look at the whole body of work, I think they would say like Sam Howell was them taking a chance on like the same kind of mid-level quarterback. And Howell to me just looks like a backup. Like, there were some people I thought, oh, maybe this is their future franchise guy. They can develop him. He's young. He looks like a low-end Baker Mayfield. So I think they took a shot on him, see what's there. They took a shot on Drew Lock. They're just getting more backup quarterbacks, and that's really what probably drafting a quarterback would ultimately did for them. And I don't think they saw Geno as a guy that would become a starter. I thought they just thought he was insurance for Russell. But I think they're going to wait until they can. I think the best time to draft a guy is when you don't need one. So having Geno does buy them some time and it gets them be a little more flexible. But the way the quarterbacks came off in this draft, like 6 in the top 12. So we'll never know what they thought of Penix. We'll never know. Apparently they weren't one of the teams that tried to trade up for him. But yeah, I think this draft class is one they're going to look at closely. And until Geno signs that extension, and I don't know if he will, and I don't know if he's going to have to play better to warrant one, in my opinion. But yeah, I think Schneider's going to want to keep looking for that guy. And he's been a little picky, but you can't say like he passed this guy, like he has an offensive lineman, like with Creed Humphrey, and you can just say, well, they blew that one. There hasn't really been any, like you said.
Well, before I touch on this briefly. Kadarius Toney, I've had a message from someone saying Kadarius Toney is signed with the Browns. So he took a visit with Seattle. So he's not going to be signing in Seattle. And look, I mean, that's just what when I was watching the highlights of the Browns Cowboys game, I just thought, man, all Deshaun Watson needs is Kadarius Toney. He'll be just fine. So he's not coming. Look, it's like I really liked Will Levis in the draft and thought that he was, I thought CJ Stroud was number 1, but then I thought I thought Anthony Richardson and Levis were the next 2, and I thought Bryce Young was QB4 in that draft. With Levis, like what I saw from Levis on Sunday, because he's the one, Jeff, that I was sort of like just interested because they could have had him, and if he turns into something, then you think, that was probably a chance. But the one thing I saw from him is that when he was at his best at Kentucky, he played very much in a system that was very suited to him. It was a lot of play action. It was a lot of getting him play action, using the arm, the offense was very much similar to a Shanahan style offense.
Yeah.
And they didn't play that way last year. And then when I watched it on Sunday, I thought they didn't play that way again. And without playing in that system, I thought he really struggled yesterday.
Yeah.
Because there were a few times where he just had no composure playing from a conventional pocket without play action. Like there was, it was like you see little things like, look, I've got a whole article to come and about the quarterbacks this weekend from college. And like there's a couple of times against Michigan where Quinn Ewers stepped up in the pocket, then sidestepped away from pressure, kept his eyes downfield, and then threw with major anticipation, like threw when the receiver was behind the defensive back, threw it into an area, receiver runs onto it, NFL type throw. And then watching Will Levis, I just kept thinking, I don't think Will Levis can do that. Mm-hmm. Like I just don't think he can. Like he needs to play in the Kentucky offense from his penultimate season at Kentucky, playing the way that Callahan had him playing on Sunday. It ain't gonna work. Like he bails too quickly.
Yeah.
He doesn't step up in the pocket. The throw at the end for the first interception, I mean, the second one was just that's a nothing. That's just trying to desperately get back in it. But that it's a huge, egregious mistake. And I think if he had stepped up in the pocket, it wouldn't have been to throw it. It'd have been to probably take off and run for a first down because there wasn't really anybody open. But it just doesn't work. And then when you sort of look at somebody like that, you could see the tools, but how does that translate? You then think, well, does the scheme matter? What you're really looking for is somebody who can probably play in any scheme if you're going to draft him in the first round. Someone who is just that good, that talented, that's got those traits to be very, very good at the next level. And it means that when you sort of look through the search, it's of this group, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Now, the problem with the quarterbacks in this draft, Jeff, is that I reckon with each of them, the ones who will go early, you could probably go, okay, that's a positive with him. That's a positive with him. And then you could run, that's a negative with him. That's a negative with him. And it's going to be a crapshoot with probably all of them for various reasons. Like Shadir Sanders is very talented. He's extremely technically gifted, very physically gifted, but makes bonehead mistakes. And I didn't if you saw this after the game, threw his O-line under the bus right after the game.
I did not see that. Not surprising.
He said, who's the other guy? The other guy from, I can't remember his name. It was the Nebraska quarterback. The one who basically in a kind of creepy way thinks he's Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Like he's basically walks like Mahomes. He's got the hair, the headband. He's basically turned himself into Mahomes.
Oh boy.
To the point that I think if he met Mahomes, you'd ask him to sign his tits.
Oh,
it's really, really, it's a bit creepy.
I think it's Mahomes' cousin.
Is he his cousin?
I think it's Dylan Raiola. I think it's his cousin. Yeah.
Oh wow. Well, he's trying really hard to be Patrick Mahomes. But the point is that after the game, Shadir Sanders went, "What was the difference today?" And he went, "Raiola got pass protection, and I didn't." And it was something like that he said. And you're thinking, you can't say that, man. Like, but you're living in this environment where your dad kind of says whatever he wants, and you're saying that. When you get to the NFL, if you say that, your coach is going to have you in like within 10 minutes of you doing that press conference and give you the biggest bollocking ever. And your coach is not your dad at the NFL. So like this, you just can't do these things. And there's going to be a maturity, whether it's maturity or whether it's just like an entitlement factor of just having your dad as the coach. But I've worked for my dad very briefly in my life. It's very different when your dad's your boss and when somebody else is your boss.
Yes.
Like, and going to the NFL and having a coach who's going to get on you a little bit, how is he going to respond to that? It makes me wonder, Jeff, whether, Sanders has got the talent to go top 5. And Sanders could go end of the first round or even in the second round and might end up being like Lamar Jackson and being a really good NFL player who someone gets great value on. But because he had no business going later, but because teams are just a little bit like Lamar had his mum as an agent and no one could get to have a meeting with him pre-draft. Like, and now you wonder, will this like put teams off Shadir, but will Shadir actually go and make a career of it in a better environment, a better situation because he doesn't go in the top 5? I don't know. But it's like little things like that you have to kind of pass through. Like, what is the scheme like? Is Quinn Ewers capable of staying healthy at his size?
Yeah.
Because he isn't the biggest guy. Is Carson Beck Daniel Jones? Or is he Eli Manning? Do you even want Eli Manning? Like, do you want Matt Ryan?
Yeah, in this version of the NFL, maybe not.
Cam Ward's got off to a great start, but look who they're playing. And, as I picked up in the first game with Cam Ward, he can make fantastic throws, but he has just got this unbelievable tendency to, like, he will do a play action, Jeff, drop back 5 steps, and then just start running backwards. Like in the first game, he ran back 20 yards and then had to throw the ball. He did very well to get the ball back to the line of scrimmage, by the way, but he almost put his team outside of field goal range by doing that. And there was no reason to, like, drop back 20 yards and make life difficult. So you, like, there's all these players, and it's really, really hard to work out who's going to be great. And, like, Caleb Williams had a tough debut. Not just Bo Nix. Jaden Daniels ran for a bunch of yards, but they lost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard. And, like, Drake May looked like crap, I thought, for North Carolina for the most part last year. I watched him in preseason, Jeff, and I thought, he looks really good. And that didn't make any sense.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, you're not wrong. And there's just so many things that are, it's such a hard position to evaluate because of what you said. Like, there's so many different, like, Shedeur Sanders is already talking about taking the Eli Manning approach and only going to a team he wants to go to. And I'm sure we can figure out where that advice is coming from. And he's not going to go to, like, Carolina. He's going to refuse to play for them. So that's going to have some people not draft him. A lot of these guys have question marks. There's no sure thing in this draft. They're going to have, if you want them to draft a quarterback, man, you're going to have to be taking a shot in the dark here because there's every one of these guys has strength and has got clear drawbacks. And we saw what happened last year. And if you saw the amount of teams, like, one of my buddies texted me this yesterday, who would be more depressing, or who would you rather have right now? Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, or Bryce Young? And I was just like,
what a choice.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't have an answer to that. It might be Bryce Young because he makes nothing compared to those guys, but all those teams that are going to be at the bottom are going to be wanting to draft quarterbacks because the GM and the coach are trying to save their jobs. So it's going to be another thing where the Seahawks are going to be outside of that range where all the top prospects are going to go, barring the season completely falling apart. And they're going to have to, again, find either their value or fall in love with a guy that has some real flaws out there. So it's a weird quarterback class. There's a lot of numbers, but there's not a lot of sure things. And when John's identified guys, he's had hits and misses. So it's going to be a very interesting year of college football from that perspective. Certainly, I didn't see enough at a Geno yesterday where I'm like, well, we got to get this guy a $45 million extension. But again, it was a really tough condition to play in with that offensive line play. And again, I said you couldn't evaluate him. So I'm sure Schneider's going to be spending all year looking at guards, looking at quarterbacks. And yeah, this is not the easiest class to find one. Like, and no one's going to do more work on this than you. So I'm going to have to keep asking you these questions every week.
Well, the only thing I would say on it is it was alarming to me, Jeff, how many 50 plus million a year quarterbacks did not look great this weekend. Yep. And that's a cautionary tale as well, that I'm waiting for the team that will be bold enough to say, we've got a decent quarterback, but I'm not going to pay him $50 million. Yeah. I'll trade him.
Yeah.
And I'll take that punt because I want to be great. I don't want to be just good enough. So we'll see if a team actually does that, especially if, the Goffs and the Cousinses and the Tuas and stuff don't live up to their massive contracts. Because you could pay Patrick Mahomes $100 million a year and it'd be worth every penny.
Oh,
but paying Jared Goff $55 million or even Dak Prescott $60 million is, that ends up being like, okay. And I don't want the Seahawks to go into a situation with any quarterback, whoever it is, where they're paying $55 to $60 million for could be worse, let's say. That's going to be the big thing. And on Bryce Young, I will say this, like a lot of people are talking about Bryce Young, this just very quickly to finish, is I wonder how long the Panthers will give up, will stay with him. And I do wonder, Jeff, whether if he gets moved at the end of this season or the season after, whether there could be a big reclamation project there. Because, he's not as bad as this. So we'll see. Anyway, that's as far as we go. Jeff, really appreciate it. Looking forward to chatting to you regularly during the NFL season. Big thank you for Jeff Simmons' time here tonight. Thank you for all your super chats as well. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment in the comments section, even if you're joining in the live chat, because it helps. Big thank you for all of the super chats. SeahawksDraftBlog.com for more analysis. Until next time, bye for now.